You have to be a professional in private if you want your field work to profit. Because even good leaders can miss the plot. And if you miss the plot about why you're the leader or how to be the best leader, then you're going to lose the plot that you're supposed to be expanding. And just realize this is a pivotal moment in your story. Either you're setting your team up for a holding pattern or a hopeful future. So you got to get it right. You're committed to continually scaling leadership without failing the leaders that you bring on. Instead of strategizing the year you're hoping to have, strategize the way you approach leadership. If I had one message to get out there to founders and leaders, it would be this. This is going to be my gift to the leadership community at large. The framework I'm describing is what I consider the big picture of the leadership landscape. What's going on and where we're heading. It's called Pioneering Leadership Framework because this is how we keep pioneering leadership through multiple terrains and even uncharted territory, no matter whether you're approaching things as a company or a community or even a movement. There are 4 phases that all founders and leaders will find themselves in, which are number 1, I felt the need to revisit the big picture of the leadership landscape. In this conversation, we'll eventually scan the original framework about pioneering leadership. More on that, but first, let me share a story from my family's recent getaway to New England. My wife and daughter and I got to join my wife's parents for a road trip through New England during the fall. It was meant to be a new core memory for our little girl and her grandparents to share together. On top of that, we just enjoyed exploring the different parts of the country and enjoyed the fall colors changing on the trees. The brisk, cool weather and the amazing landscape was epic for sure. However, by far, my favorite part of the road trip through multiple states was seeing the mountains. In fairness, other people may just call them hills, but in comparison to where we live, which is as flat as a parking lot, this was pretty epic to see rolling mountains covered with thousands of trees as far as the eye can see. As you can imagine, it really put me in the pioneering frame of mind. On one particular morning, we got to hike up one of these big hills somewhere in Maine. My wife led the way and I carried our daughter in this blue carrier that attaches her to me at the chest level. So I was basically rucksacking for about 45 minutes, gradually up this 450-foot incline. It was amazing and difficult, but I was so motivated by the scenery and the symbolism of the whole thing. My wife and I were tag teaming to carry our daughter up the mountain. So ironically, I was wearing a fleece shirt at that time, and by the time I got halfway up, I was wondering about dropping the shirt altogether because my little girl was putting off some heat. I did have to catch my breath a few times, but I am so thankful to announce that I made it up the big hill with her and my wife. To reward our efforts, we were welcomed by the most refreshing mountaintop breeze and then this large panoramic view of that rugged landscape. No houses, buildings, cityscape, just beautiful nature. I had to pause there and just take in the big picture. It was so rewarding and it really energized me after taking that hike. Although we couldn't stay up there, we did take pictures and then we brought the accomplishment back to the car with us. And I want to use that as the setup for this conversation. Most founders and leaders never get to climb above the tree line to see the big picture of their own leadership landscape. They're unprepared for the pressure that comes with managing their day-to-day especially on multiple fronts. And then on top of that, they have all these unwelcome disruptions that just add compound difficulty to their day. Instead of climbing, they wait around at the level that they can manage. Now, I'm not saying that it's inherently wrong to stay at the level you can manage. I could easily make a case that it's a good example, for stewardship or something like that. However, the emphasis here in this conversation is that it's worth making the effort to get a big picture of your leadership and then to give a big picture of your leadership away to others as well. Most people in our teams and communities simply aren't able to make it up to the top on their own. Like my daughter, there will be younger future leaders in our care that need our help to share our progress with them in order to help them inherit enduring accomplishments. I could go on about the value and even the virtue of going up the mountain of the Lord, but I'll save that conversation for another time. In short, let me just say that whole concept of mountain climbing is supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be demanding because of what it produces. Thankfully, we did get this big payoff when we arrived at the epic big picture spot, and that's what I'm hoping to pass on to you. Now, there are 3 letdowns that happen when we don't make the effort to understand leadership from that higher pioneer perspective. Number 1, we let down our team because we're not able to give them payoffs for all the hard work they're putting in, and they don't feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, so they just bog down without knowing what they're capable of. Number 2, we let down our future leaders, the ones we're counting on to carry on, because if they don't get the big picture, they won't imagine themselves leading well in the next phase. They're going to remain small-minded, confused about their place and purpose, and eventually just move on to some other thing. And then number 3, we let down ourselves without a big picture of why this work matters and how we're accomplishing things in the macro sense. What we find is that regret is heavier than rucksacking. Every leader desires purposeful expansion, but what most founders and leaders is unfortunately the opposite. They're met with exhaustion, and that can harden into hopelessness. So before I give you the big picture of the leadership landscape, let this be the first call to action. Always make the effort to get the big picture for your leadership landscape. Staying encouraged is one of the most surefire ways that we can stay engaged in the long haul of our leadership journey. The big picture is what gives you the payoff to keep going. You don't get to stay up there every day, but the moment can become a core memory. That stays with you as you continue. So getting up to higher ground takes effort, and it often feels like it's out of the way or very time consuming. So I want to encourage you, do it anyway. You may feel like you've made a mistake. You don't have enough in the tank to finish that task, but you do. When you make an outcome-based commitment, you're going to figure out how to keep working until you win. And that's what I want to urge you to do, is pull away, get away, so you can get that higher perspective and then bring that payoff back into the day-to-day work with you. One thing I've learned about getting away and doing so often and intentionally is that you can come back with more wisdom than you expected to find. I'm all for being a lifelong learner, but these field trips are just categorically different. You're not getting more know-how, right? It's not like you're going to a class. You're getting wisdom from the higher perspective point of view. And that's the wisdom you're going to need to work off of for years and years to come. Now, in addition, you can come back from these, field trips to the mountaintop feeling bigger on the inside. You actually have an expanded capacity by that experience. And so that's what's going to become. That's because the view alone of so much expanded territory somehow becomes a part of you. That's why I love to journey with a founder or a group of leaders or just a really high capacity person who's dreaming about a lot, who wants to accomplish more. They've got something specific, but they don't have the language for it yet. I call it field trips to your future. And they don't realize it at first, but what we're basically doing is we're scaling a lot of ground internally in the hope of getting to some sort of big aha moment that's going to serve them. Now, I've been doing this for years and it never gets old for me. Many times I've just reached for a napkin or a scrap piece of paper to quickly map out the big picture that we're taking in together or that we're talking about together. And it's this discovery-based process that I urge leaders to go through over and over. It is so simple to do, and yet I have found firsthand from the feedback I get, with these people that they don't think about doing it. Like they're like, man, I never considered how important this was for me. And I don't blame them. I totally get it. There's things preoccupying them. There's things that are keeping them locked in to a specific level. But when we don't do that, we're not considering the next phase now. We can't perceive how different things can or will be for them in the next few years. And then most of all, we don't understand how the big picture is making us better prepared leaders. It's totally understandable, like I said, we get preoccupied being the leader instead of preparing ourselves to actually lead in new ways. Now think about that. Not just categorically name tag, I'm the leader, but how are you going to leverage a life-changing experience that helps you lead in new ways? If this internal plateau continues in tenured teams and established organizations, something very dangerous can happen. The very definition of leadership changes from visionary to stationary. It's like thinking the lion we see in the zoo is the way a lion really is. And the leadership landscape plateaus, causing great causes to sunset and really good people to lose their way in the process. Apparently, I've been publishing videos like this for 5 years now. Woohoo! And during that time, I've been documenting my own leadership journey with others in mind. My intention has remained the same: to honor Christ by pioneering the future landscape of leadership so the next generation of field-worthy organizations have an even better chance at getting to the hopeful future because they have more than enough prepared leaders to get them there. In short, the leadership landscape is changing dramatically. When we look out into our various industries and institutions, we won't be able to find the stalwart leaders that we counted on for decades. We kind of take them for granted sometimes. Many have graduated into their eternal rewards. And I'm very thankful for their good example, although I miss many of them already. Sadly, it seems like just as many have failed horribly in one way or another. They've broken our hearts in ways we didn't even anticipate, and we never even met them personally, which indicates how weighty leadership roles can actually be. I mean, we counted on them to stay steady in uncertain times and get us ready during those moments with reliable guidance, and now they're just disqualified. That makes many people distrust the function of leadership overall, and then it disorients good people that are still wayfinding in their journey further. So the way we work has changed remarkably, and yet the way we lead, for one reason or another, has not. And that's not okay. We need to prepare leaders for the future now in practical ways. So they're not just futuristic, but they're future ready. And they're actually competent and confident to do the courageous thing when and where it counts. In addition, we must prepare future leaders to go further, and in many cases faster than we could go. This is simply like mission critical in my view of things. I have a few reasons for this, but at a summary level, the worst thing that any company or community can go through is bad leadership. Bad leadership doesn't automatically make the people leading bad, but what tends to happen is that they get entrenched in their positional roles, and then that slows down the real future work that must be done swiftly and decisively in order to help others be proven prepared. All of this that I'm talking about can be remedied simply by urging those who are leaders to make the effort and go up that proverbial mountain where they must learn to operate both with a higher standard and a higher perspective. And by the way, if you emphasize both, hey, leaders need to have a higher standard, leaders need to be making decisions with a higher perspective, that makes team cultures better. It's not high horse syndrome, it's not ivory tower thinking. No, genuine leadership is the kind that leads by example and then calls everyone higher and then helps as many as possible to actually go on their own leadership journey as well. So how do we actually keep pioneering leadership? What does it look like to actually lead like a pioneer in your unique field of work and influence? After working with hundreds of leaders and refining my core messaging with founders in mind, I felt the need to revisit my insights and strategies about pioneering leadership with a few baby steps of my own. This is going to be my gift to the leadership community at large. It's a big picture view of the leadership landscape based on the unique emphasis that I'm called to contribute, which is the impact and importance of pioneering leadership. And then on a quick side note, that emphasis is also related to the need for all leaders to keep pioneering in order to bring the people in their care safely through their uncharted territory into a hopeful future. So I created this original framework to give founders and leaders that mountaintop big picture so they could cover a lot of ground much more decisively as they prepare to expand into new fields and then eventually deploy a competent network of prepared leaders alongside them. I admit that you may not be able to follow all of my pioneering accent, but I assure you what I'm telling you is valuable and relevant. It applies to both the solopreneur and the CEO. It will equip you personally and professionally to enjoy a really long, strong leadership journey. It could even turn a first-generation organization into a dynamic movement with multiple successors and enduring success stories. The framework I'm describing is what I consider the big picture of the leadership landscape, what's going on and where we're heading. It's called Pioneering Leadership Framework because this is how we keep pioneering leadership through multiple terrains and even uncharted territory, no matter whether you're approaching things as a company or a community or even a movement. There are 4 phases that all founders and leaders will find themselves in, which are number 1, personal ownership, which emphasizes humility. Number 2, entrepreneurship, which emphasizes capacity. Number 3, executive leadership, which emphasizes strategy. And number 4, pioneering leadership, which emphasizes territory. Now, don't get turned around between the framework itself and then the last phrase, both being pioneering leadership. One of the reasons I'm okay with keeping it this way for now is simply because pioneering leadership is the aspirational goal that all leaders are going to share. Moving on, let's take a look at each of these phases a bit more. Number one is personal ownership. And this is going to require us as leaders to practice humility. It's also where the faith-centered component of my pioneering coaching comes in. Pioneering anything in your leadership journey, whether it becomes for-profit or nonprofit work, will require humility. You must be willing to launch out again and again and again. And over time, you'll have to initiate new things that make you a beginner all over again. It's this personal initiative that is rooted in humility. And it's what I see as the volunteer spirit, the willingness to pioneer something that's new yet needed. And even doing so when it feels unprecedented. Either you've never done this before personally, or you might get to an opportunity that's literally never been done before by anyone. In many cases, though, you'll initiate something that just hasn't been done in your particular context or your field. This is where you're both, a creator and an innovator. And some people, they like to start from scratch. Other people are reimagining something that has expired. But regardless, you're doing this new thing. And I want to encourage you, humility isn't like a dog tucking their tail between their legs. It's more like the willingness to follow the Lord in a courageous way. And that's why the first piece of this big picture is actually the faith-centered component. Because you're learning to fear the Lord, not fear people, not fear failure, not fear death. This isn't foolish. This isn't selfish ambition. This is kingdom vision. I talk to so many leaders who have real life-giving vision, but they're just so burdened with frustration because they can't figure out how all of this is going to happen. And they're suffering from a weird version of what I'm going to playfully call replacement theology. Now, I use that reference in a cheeky way because I'm actually not referring to replacement theology in the more technical sense at all. And for the record, I don't ascribe or subscribe to replacement theology because it doesn't work biblically. But beside the point, the reason I use that phrase, that a lot of pioneers suffer with, quote, the frustration of, quote, replacement theology, is because what they're basically doing is they're well-intentioned pioneers that are wondering how their new vision is somehow going to replace the current context that they're serving or leading in. As if, their current leaders have it all wrong and they have to make it all right. And so they're going to wait their turn or overturn the current in order to replace it with this new thing. And this is just a misunderstanding and a painful experience at that. It can cause wasted time, sideways energy, needless wounding within close proximity. My encouragement for pioneers in this phase with this frustration is to really take your sense of loyalty through the Lord's X-ray vision machine. Say, Lord, would you examine my heart, my motives? Would you judge any worry inside of me or anything that causes angst? And you may think that you're being loyal to stay put in a place of honor, but actually, I want you to examine the fruit of your actions, because maybe they're a bit more bitter than you'd like to admit. I mean, what if your motivation is actually a mixture of good and some gray, like fear, stubbornness, entitlement, assumptions, envy, and so on? What if you're not meant to replace someone else's work, but to build upon it, to expand it in your own way and into new fields? And that's when we feel the humility process really kicking in, because it's much easier to have big ideas when you're not paying the bills. And it's harder to be a pioneer when you have to venture out into the no man's land for a time. And that's where we learn to depend on the Lord and then prove the value of our ideas in the wild. Again, my encouragement here for the pioneers who are frustrated where they are is to grow their personal sense of territory. Don't feel limited or belittled where you are. Accept the challenge to become the kind of person who can actually do what you're hoping for. Instead of harping on other people, you need to do this, you need to do this, I've seen it, I know where we need to go, you need to do this. Why don't you do it? This is why this category is all about personal ownership. If you've been tracking with my leadership work for a while, you know I used to call this category self-leadership. I still value self-leadership, but I felt the need to clarify what I was really meaning here. You're becoming an owner. In general, you're taking personal ownership of an opportunity. However, in a more acute sense, you may be hoping to own something, to own a car, own a house, own a business, own an organization that becomes far-reaching. Ownership is the real issue in my mind here. It's easier to be a renter, figuratively speaking. Ownership refers to commitment. You're saying the responsibility will roll back on me. When you learn to accept that without complaining or blame shifting, you find a lot of opportunities that other people won't take advantage of. So to recap this phase is all about the humility to pioneer in terms of starting something new. You're initiating. That's what it comes down to. You accept the fact that it's going to be demanding and humbling. It's in a totally new field, totally new context that you've never been to before. And at the core, that's why you're learning how to stay faith-centered. This is about your why, the internal decision-making, the directional operating system, making uncharted choices with that internal compass that's always reliable. Leadership is not for the faint of heart. It's possible to be great without leading a Christ-centered life, but the greatest leader of all is Jesus Christ. I actually have a whole field training that walks you through my favorite leadership framework. It's called the Life Compass. It deals with life planning and leadership from a Christ-centered perspective. You can just ask for that by going to peterburchfield.com. There's a way you can message me. Now, leading like a pioneer means you're practicing humility, staying faith-centered, and taking personal ownership. That's what phase 1 is all about. The second phase leaders go through when they're pioneering is the entrepreneurship phase. This is both meant to be literal and figurative. Whether you're thinking about doing your work in a for-profit or a non-profit way, you're still taking the dive into deeper waters, as the origin of the word entrepreneurship suggests. From what I've learned, the idea of being an entrepreneur comes from a French word that means to dive in to a venture and to get fully immersed in the work of some sort of enterprise with the hope of a reward for your risk. I like to say enterprise. You're willing to enter the arena of business, whatever that may be, because you have a prize in mind. For example, when David entered the battlefield with Goliath, he actually had a prize in mind. He knew the rewards related to success. For everyone else, the price of admission into that field, which happened to be a battlefield, was just too costly and the stakes were too high. However, the reason David was willing to risk it for the brisket, as we say in the South, is because he knew that the Lord was with him. So you can see even here, kind of calling back to phase 1, how the faith-centered piece actually helps you launch into the second phase, making that confident decision to dive in and to take on some sort of enterprise. So entrepreneurship is a mindset and a method that can benefit your leadership journey. Do I think that all leaders operate like entrepreneurs? No, but pioneers do. And to lead like a pioneer, you have to embrace this entrepreneur way of life. Now, one of the differences between personal ownership in phase 1 and entrepreneurship in phase 2 is that although they are both necessary for effective leadership, entrepreneurship goes beyond that initial move to generate profitable momentum. So you're learning how to profit in order to create a movement with other people so that way it's sustainable and successful. In other words, this phase is focused on scaling. In phase 1, we could say it's like the scales that are making a final verdict. You are taking ownership, you're going for it. But now you've made that commitment, it's time to scale that commitment into profitable momentum. And that shows the contrast, right? In personal ownership, it's about what's going on internally. It's more about the direction of your life and you stepping up to make big decisions. But this phase is where you're going to start to work on things in your environment and you're transforming your field, so to speak, into a real base camp that others are going to start rushing into to be a part of. To use another example for entrepreneurship, Jesus taught a parable about a man who found a treasure hidden in a field. He was so happy, he gladly sold everything he had to buy the field. Now, of course, this is primarily about the gospel, how much God treasures us. However, it's meant to help leaders and entrepreneurs and business owners think deeply about what it takes to be focused and fruit-bearing in this phase. And so I want to suggest that there's another insight that strengthens our resolve to do God's work, and it's realizing that this could represent a template of the gradient between private and professional. And what I mean by that is he saw the field, but he knew he had to work privately first if he was going to secure the potential of owning that field one day. There's a time when you come into a new field. It's an opportunity, it's an idea, and it's like this huge discovery. This could change your life, change your family, change your future. And it feels like Christmas in July with real snow to go with it. But if you go off shouting about what you just found in celebration before you did any preparation, before you actually put in the work, then you're going to end up crying because your field will get overtaken by someone else or by more than one team if we're talking about a new industry. So the lesson here is that leadership in this phase looks like pioneering your new field with the entrepreneur hat on. You have to pick up new tools, learn to work differently in order to secure the success that you're hoping for. Your work has to be private in order to prove out publicly. Eventually, you'll be able to tell everybody about what you saw and how you made that commitment, you went for it, and you made all those happy, scrappy moves. You became the victor in your unique field, but that's not the case yet. When I coach founders and leaders through this stage, whether they're entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, I see this sort of thing all the time. And technically, it's more like two ditches, two extremes on the path. The first side is people that are just getting started, maybe in that solopreneur phase. They're so infatuated by the potential of what they're working on or working towards. And so they just kind of rush in hastily, and then they're just not prepared for the pressure. They get overwhelmed by all of the decision fatigue. And one of the telltale signs, I guess, is they're overemphasizing marketing. They're giving away their own element of surprise instead of steadily positioning themselves as the owner in their new field, right? You have to be a professional in private if you want your field work to profit. I just think that's so important. Let me say that again. To be a leader in this phase, you're going to have to lean into the mindset of an entrepreneur. And whether you're a solopreneur, whether you're the chief everything officer right now, you have to be a professional in private if you want your field work to profit. And that means dealing with the mission criticalness of your own capacity and not, just all of the chatter that is going to stroke your ego while, you're waiting for something to happen. And we're going to talk more about capacity in a moment, because that is the emphasis in what do you actually work on to succeed, to excel in this phase. But let me go to the other side of that path, the other ditch, the other extreme that I see a lot of leaders fall prey to. Leadership here is more than just thought leadership, more than just personal ownership. You can't just have good ideas and good intentions and personal initiative. It's like, oh, I'm going to start this. No, I'm going to start that. No, I'm going to start something else. It's like starting is important, but that's the lesson of the last phase. This phase is now all about learning how to occupy your field of work and influence on the leadership level by doing the work, so that way you can gain the treasure of accessing people that are going to help you go to the next level together. So this is not a manicured lawn. Okay, this field of work and opportunity or influence, this thing you need to be focused on right now, it's not turnkey. It's not just, this beautiful estate. This is rural, remote, off-grid, no utilities, kind of hairy, scary. You don't know if there might be something living in there or people kind of crisscrossing illegally. You're stepping into a mess, and you got to put your muddy boots on to even get out there. And that's the point. Groundbreaking business is pioneering work. And many founders and leaders think that, oh, we just live a digital lifestyle. That's the new normal. But actually, they forget that relational is always the gold standard in any type of work that you're going to take on. So whether you have an online platform or app or not, you still have to transform your remote location, which is that idea somewhere over there that nobody's thinking about, into a destination experience that now other people are flocking to and they can't stop, talking to you about. This is gonna tee up the second extreme, the ditch on the other side of the path, which is not for solopreneurs and founders that are just getting started, but really the other side are the established entrepreneurs, the leaders who have employees, and they have been winning for a few years. They've proven their way in their field, and they've bought into the field, so they have a sense of ownership, but they're not tapping into the treasure that's motivated in the first place. So notice, what are the two ditches? It's approaching the treasure that's in your field inappropriately. On the inexperienced side, it's getting so giddy and excited that you tell everybody, oh, I found a treasure. And you will lose that treasure. You'll lose access to the field if you don't respect the opportunity. On the other side, you have the field, so you feel like you're good, but you're still not respecting the treasure because you're too familiar with it now. It's out of sight, out of mind. You're not doing anything with it. And so it's really important that you're learning how to be the leader in this phase in order to keep pioneering. On this extreme, when you're the entrepreneur who's established, you might have employees, you might have a proven way of winning, you've bought the field, but you're not tapping into the treasure that's motivating to go on. You're still thinking about how to work the field instead of appreciating the wealth that the field gave you access to. This is where you lose sight of the futurability of your field and you get strapped down by familiarity. You get too familiar with the view from your own front porch. Sure, you own the property, but you stopped walking that property years ago. And so both of these ditches on the path, being too quick to go public when you're not prepared, or becoming privately preoccupied with your own appearance of progress, but you're still unprepared to harness the real wealth that's within reach. Both of those ditches choke out your chances of scaling in leadership. They stop you from moving on to the next phase, and you're just in a holding pattern, possibly for years. So when you're in this buying and building dynamic in this phase of leadership, thinking like an entrepreneur, the make or break issue in your leadership journey is going to be your capacity. Do you have the bandwidth to buy into the whole field or not? Because it really is all or nothing. You can't lead in this phase halfway or half-hearted. And you can't, miscalculate commitment by itemizing all of these cluttered loyalties to things that you probably should have sold off in the first place. It's one of the toughest barriers to breakthrough that I see leaders experience in this phase. Upgrading their identity from owner to entrepreneur. And I don't want to do semantics. I'm trying to make a point. If you think you have to own every decision, own every project, own every interaction with the team, with clients, with vendors, then you award yourself. You say, well, I'm being a good leader. And that's true, because you had to learn that lesson, personal ownership, in the last phase. But it's not the only attribute to lead like a pioneer. All of these attributes that we're going to talk about are meant to stack. And the next skill set is practicing the enterprising style that can understand capacity and profitable stewardship. See, capacity comes down to this. Can you figure out how to handle more with a hands-off approach? To revisit the parable of the person who bought the field with the enormous treasure, the way they won was by selling off as much as they could in order to tap into the assets hidden in the field. And yes, a point can be made about selling. Selling is a skill that you and I can get better at. But I'm making a different point here, and I don't want to alienate the nonprofit leaders. The point being made here is that the way to increase your capacity is actually by what you offload, not by taking on more stuff. And scaling through addition just leaves you scatterbrained. The better way to lead is to discern the treasure in your field. To take the dive into the futurability of it. And I love farmers, I love ranchers, but the value of the field in this parable was not the growing and the grazing. That's just thinking about the top layer. Actually, there was apparently some sort of Monte Cristo level treasure hidden in this field. And with that shifts this whole conversation away from just business tactics to real leadership mastery. Like, would you believe me if I said that your leadership capacity is not about how much you can do, or even how much you're, quote, responsible for? And you might push back. You say, Peter, no. My family has owned and operated this type of work for 75 years. We're the best. We're the experts. We are the responsible ones. We are the owners of all of this. Are you saying that I'm not responsible or should not be responsible for this field of leadership? And actually, I'm saying more than that. I'm saying you're missing the future for the field. The same way they say you're missing the forest for the trees, I'm saying you're missing the future for the field itself. Because you're just thinking about what you can grow or what you can graze on that field, and you're not stewarding the immense treasure that got you into that field in the first place. And when we miss the future for the field, we work differently, and we literally work our dream to death because we don't know how to steward the treasure that's in the field through multiple stages. We get stuck in this one default mode where we're doing everything. And yes, the way you approach leadership capacity is either future-proofing your life's work or it's forfeiting it. So we have to move on to the other two phases, but let me just attempt to finish one point here. This is why we need to keep pioneering leadership, because even good leaders can miss the plot. And if you miss the plot about why you're the leader or how to be the best leader, then you're going to lose the plot that you're supposed to be expanding. The work of leadership in this phase is all about understanding how to leverage the treasure that's been available in your field the whole time. Your field of work, your field of influence, which are the people that you're going to come by as you do that work. See, there's certain relationships, certain partnerships that are waiting on you in your field. So can you steward the field in such a way that valuable partnerships are thriving? Can you manage the entire operation within your fence line with an excellent spirit to such a degree that people appreciate being there in that field with you more and more and more? Is there some sense of growing teamwork or network emerging from the relational equity that's available in your field? See, if you shout about your opportunity too soon, the wrong people are going to show up. You're going to get poachers and peddlers. And if you shrink back to what feels comfortable to you, you're going to lose good people that you're counting on for the future. The young bucks and the seasoned pillars, they're going to have to leave. But if you can lead well in this phase, you figure out skills that profit where you are and prepare an oasis effect that inspires more pioneers to join you in that field. And then together you can expand into new fields. I really hope this makes sense, and I hope you hear the heart of what I'm saying as well. Entrepreneurship is a skill that we can develop to grow our leadership capacities. It's the ability to build for a team, and even a team of leaders. And that requires you to grow your capacity. You grow your capacity by offloading more than you personally are holding on to. And the best leaders who are really world class are future focused. That is why they are offloading so much. It's because they have a vision of where they need to be and what is possible. They're offloading short-term possessions for long-term value. Okay, before we move on, please share your appreciation for this pioneering leadership framework in your own way. Support the podcast, share this conversation with others, or become part of this executive coaching work. The third phase of leadership that helps us resist internal plateau is going to be executive leadership. It requires a whole new element in your approach, which is strategy. Now, there's going to be a counterintuitive insight coming up in a moment. So let me prepare you in advance. The only way to purposefully choose to keep working on your leadership capacity is when you're staying future focused. Because right now you're probably feeling maxed out or you're feeling good about how much you're doing. So on either extreme, whether you're anxious or whether you're just apathetic, you're like, I can't grow my capacity, or I don't need to grow my capacity. But either of those are bad examples, bad things. So the only way we're going to grow our leadership capacity is by staying future focused. That's why I put entrepreneurship and capacity and future focus all together in that phase. When you are future focused, you see the potential in your field. It's hairy, scary, it's undeveloped, it's raw, it's remote, nobody knows about it, nobody wants to go there, and yet you have a vision. And that vision is transformational. It can transform something that feels just unwanted into a place that is drawing people in from every direction. And that's what is happening in that entrepreneurship phase. You see how the work you're doing there is way bigger than you. And so you're building capacity because you're thinking about other people. And that's what entrepreneurs can do really well. And that's why capacity and future focus, like I said, go together. In the entrepreneurship stage, it's all about capacity building. You're figuring out how to grow your capacity to be able to take on every aspect of the operation at scale. You're committed to continually scaling leadership without failing the leaders that you bring on. Capacity in you, your people, your work, your brand, it's just the constant conversation. Leading there in that phase 2, entrepreneurship, looks like you living in the future. You're staying focused on doing the work privately as a professional that's going to secure the potential in real time, despite pushback, despite discouragement, despite a lack of resourcing or support, and even in the mix of very, very rugged conditions. That's what it looks like. That's where a lot of you are. You're just in this building, developing phase. It's a way of life that entrepreneurs seem to embody. And I want to recognize that it's not just business tactics, it's the real leadership function at work. And it would be wonderful to equip everyone on the team to adopt the best parts of that ethos, because it will serve your team overall. Now, as your capacity grows, so will your sense of teamwork and network. People will flock to you for many different reasons. Some will stay for a short time, while others feel more at home long term. The next threshold in your leadership journey, particularly when you're pioneering in leadership, like I said, will be upgrading your leadership approach from being the team leader to actually being a team of leaders. I cannot say exactly when this is going to happen for you, because it's just somewhere in between phase 2, phase 3, between entrepreneurship and executive leadership. For example, some brands, they start with founder teams from the get-go, while other large organizations still function like a mom and pop shop behind closed doors. So size isn't the best indicator when it comes to the leadership function. Small teams can win with high functioning leaders, just like big teams can suffer if dysfunctional behaviors are tolerated on the leadership team level. With that said, the executive leadership phase is going to become categorically different. It's a different way to lead. It's still pioneering, but it's just not that homesteading style. In this phase, you're focused on being the best leader of leaders that you can be, which is going to bring your organizational culture closer to the new opportunities and make you better prepared for the threats that are looming. The bottom line to this new line of thinking is you're no longer the only adult in the room. You're no longer the obvious go-to on the team. You have to learn how to lead on a higher level and leverage a team of leaders approach so that way it's serving every context of your company or community. You're not willing to become the bottleneck, and you want to make sure that your entire field has real leadership. So think of it this way. You're not just showing up on one front line anymore. You have to learn how to shift into that team of leaders approach. So leadership is showing up on more than one front line, or you could just say fence line. This means leadership isn't going to be measured only by your presence, but also what happens in your absence. You can't be everywhere anymore. You have to trust the team of leaders approach to make your entire organization frontline ready, like on every front. And that's a big shift that a lot of leaders are not willing to embrace. And there's different reasons for that. But this is where you are empowering leaders to do the entrepreneurship thing in their own context. All right, they're going to be raised up, they're going to be trusted to make decisions that are building capacity, assembling teams, and they're doing so now in their own pockets of this larger map that you've been making. If this isn't happening with a strong sense of executive leadership at the core, then the team map is going to grow by default, and it's going to keep growing because it has a lot of momentum, right? That was what was happening in the scaling phase. But without that executive leadership function, then the team map fractures into factions, and that can turn any organization into a codependent culture that's riddled with unsanctioned silos and celebrity antics. Your organization can have the appearance of mission and momentum, while the people inside are just too exhausted or ineffective to rally. So how do you keep pioneering when the leadership landscape, or to put it more starkly, your org chart, is already showing the warning signs of internal plateau? This is where rising stars can turn into a meteor shower really quickly. And this is why I want to just hit this head on. I care about founders and business owners in particular because I get how much of a catch-22 this can feel for you. You know that you can't lead alone to take your operation forward, but you also know that you can't lead a team of high-powered personalities either. So it's like a lose-lose. Do you sacrifice your health and home life in the name of being responsible, keeping things on track? Or do you risk losing the foundational DNA because you had to bring on all these new decision makers who have their own ideas now? So suffice to say, let me just pause and share my heartfelt care for your situation. If you're in this situation, it's very frustrating. And I imagine that you've poured yourself into your leadership work for many years already. And just realize this is a pivotal moment in your story. Either you're setting your team up for a holding pattern or a hopeful future. So you got to get it right. The scenarios you're facing are in fact more complex. That's not just in your head. They are actually becoming more complex. And the demand for action is happening at a much faster rate. And that pressure is really hard on founders and business owners and senior leaders. It messes with their confidence. It challenges their sense of leadership. And that's why this phase is all about making your leadership approach more sophisticated to deal with the multifaceted nature of your new territory. It's bigger. It's grown over the years. And the scale is much broader than when you first started. And the stakes are probably feeling higher. And so, when you first started, you were up to the task because the scale of it made a little more sense. But now your organization has grown, the company footprint is much bigger, so to speak, the team map is much bigger, and yet the leaders that are currently in your ranks, they're younger, they're less experienced, they don't have all of the context that you do. So it's just off balance scenario. It's like here we have this much bigger organization with leaders that are not up to it. And so the way you keep pioneering leadership in this phase is by emphasizing strategy. This is actually the phase where strategy matters, counts, and has to happen. You'll have to get strategic about the way you approach leadership, both personally for yourself as well as overall for your team. The pressure will be, pushing you to, we got to move quickly. And the temptation you're going to feel is to just keep stalling and slow things down in this hold steady maneuver. But neither of those things are acceptable, right? You have to change your directional style. That's why I say it's categorically different. To deliberately think on how you're going to lead decisively with a team of leaders approach, and then empower that new emphasis to show up in this new space of executive leadership. So here comes that counterintuitive insight. The effectiveness of leadership in this phase is actually decided by a frontline ready approach. In other words, the scorecard is no longer on your desk. The scorecard is not even at HQ. The constant question here in this phase is all about leadership preparedness. Is your leadership community, ranging all levels, becoming frontline ready? How can we at the executive level better prepare our leaders on the front lines? Are they being trained to be codependent followers or competent, confident leaders? I've said it before, the founders and executives who excel here have a different motivation. They're not concerned about getting everybody in the organization to pay attention to one person at the top of the org chart. Instead, their conviction is making sure that the leaders at the core are paying attention to every part of the organization. So when you begin to strategize with multiple leaders, multiple levels, you strengthen your executive leadership, and then that streamlines the operational readiness of your workforce And then together, y'all can expand into new fields despite the unknown pressures. As I'm making this training, it's Q4. This is the time of the year when founders and leader teams are preparing the people involved in their missions for the upcoming year. And they go on to strategic offsites and leadership retreats, and I'm all about it. In fact, I'd love to just plan my annual calendar around being in these kinds of conversations because they are so consequential. And in that spirit, let me quickly mention that I'm offering my expertise in executive coaching to help you make leadership scalable. The way you can reach me and we can figure out if it's a good fit, you just go to peterburchfield.com and there's a button you can click called Ask Peter and just ask a question about working with me in that way. But even if you don't do that, even if we cannot work together, I still want to help you prepare your organization, your team to be frontline ready. So here's a fast track insight to be the most effective at preparing your leaders for the upcoming year and really any upcoming year, regardless of the unknown pressures. Instead of strategizing the year you're hoping to have, strategize the way you approach leadership, starting at the executive level, and then you're working your way to each connected level after that. It's a basic principle. Work on yourself more than your job. Work on your leadership culture more than team compliance. It's much harder to design an operating system around prepared leaders than to just reorg everyone into multitasking type work, but do it anyway. In fact, it feels more productive to plan your ideal year, but it's all going to come down to leadership preparedness in the field. Time after time, we see this. It's the trust building exercise that executives must embrace. Do we trust our team of leaders approach? Do we trust each other to lead in different fields? Do we trust that our frontline leaders are in fact prepared to lead? And then do they trust the quality of the training and support that we offer them? If you're looking for an example of strong executive leadership, I want to speak to both the heart and the head of that conversation. On the heart level, you're going to get a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight from the ultimate leader, again, Jesus. When you look at Jesus's leadership approach, he's putting in the foundational groundwork for a movement. And then we're going to pick up with the apostles like Peter, James, and Paul, among others. And that's the downstream dynamics of the same movement. So when we're thinking about leadership, and I would encourage you study leadership from the Bible, then you can understand the full architecture of a multiplying movement in the context of a relational ecosystem. So more to be said on that later, but the second case study that I would encourage you to check out to think maybe a little more tactically about executive leadership is I've learned a bunch from learning from the military field and other high-performing teams. It's actually kind of funny. There was a female who messaged on a video I put on TikTok, and it was in the comments, and she said, "Do you have any examples other than sports and war?" And I mean, I am a guy, but you know, the answer was yes. I do have other videos with other examples. However, without digressing, without trying to make a rant about this, I just want to say that business leaders and faith leaders in particular, not excluding other types of influencers, were simply not trained to lead under high pressures. And so that's why I think we're going to have to go humbly and look at other case studies and look at other industries and look at other disciplines and other parts of the world, so that way we can import some of those missing ingredients like discipline or grit or collaboration or preparation that are really going to be needed when we put this into a pioneering context. Now, when you study other case studies, it's not going to be a perfect fit. So you're not looking for copy paste, but you can gain insights and tools that are going to better serve the leaders that you employ and then the teams that you're going to deploy further than you. So that brings us to the fourth phase of this expansive leadership movement that I'm calling pioneering leadership. For the sake of time, I'm actually going to discuss this one the least because it's actually more of an aspirational phase anyway. We never finish pioneering in leadership. We never arrive at a point where our careers or our callings are just settled, right? We never want to just settle where we are. We always want to keep pioneering. And so we have to fight the familiarity and the dysfunctions so that way we can fulfill a heavenly work that's meant to prepare the future in more ways than one. As a Jesus follower, I'm preparing leaders who hope to prepare the way for Jesus and his kingdom. It's way bigger than me, but I know my part to play. In this chapter of my story, I'm committed to serve in as many fields as I can by helping founders and leaders in them. Leaders need encouragement. Leaders need endurance. I realize being a leader of anything isn't actually popular. In too many cases, it seems, the very idea of leadership is both mistrusted and misrepresented. But our world still needs hope and courage, and that's why the standard of leadership has never mattered more than it does now. The best chance we have to navigate this season of acceleration that we're facing is to prepare more leaders to be deployed into more fields. And we're going to feel the pressure to just consolidate under, superhero-like leaders. And actually, the antidote is to empower a movement of prepared people who are going to lead like pioneers in the new terrain. Now, the epitome of bad leadership is no one who cares to prepare. No one who's thinking about preparing to lead well or to take care of others when it really matters. The antidote to bad leadership isn't one heroic person, but it's an entire movement of empowered people who are willing to lead well by example and then be on teams that are serving multiple fields of life. So when you're in this phase of leadership, you got to think bigger. And what I love about being in this phase of leadership is that it does cause you to think bigger. You care about the next phase. You start caring about the future generations. You invest yourself to help future leaders show up ready. Now, I get it. Entrepreneurs don't really have to think about this stuff. They're focused on personal growth and business strategies. Maybe political activists are probably thinking about advancing a cause or a set of core values. And even faith leaders or community leaders, they're generally developing people who will integrate into their communities as contributors. But if I had one message to get out there to founders and leaders, it would be this. If you're frustrated with how long it's taking to make progress, it means your operating system is depleting you, not deploying others. The new way to charge into uncharted territory is refusing to lead everything and choosing to install leadership everywhere you go by preparing leaders with frameworks for their unique frontline scenarios. This kind of teamwork attracts prepared leaders to work with you in your field. And that's what you want right now. You want the strength of community and the power of disruptive collaboration. You may not be able to focus your time on empowering other leaders yet, and that's fine. But there are many experienced people who are in this phase, and they're ready to go beyond just developing teams to deploying leaders. I created a self-assessment to help you know exactly which phase you need to be focused on right now. And the easiest way to access it is you go to peterburchfield.com, you click the Ask Peter button, and then you can just ask for it that way. Thanks so much to all the founders and leaders out there. I'm here to pioneer with you. Please share my podcast, Prepare to Go There. Join my next event training, the Prepared Leaders Challenge, and ask a question, like I mentioned, for your leadership context, or ask about executive coaching with me by going to peterburchfield.com. Remember, the future has so many fields waiting for you, so prepare to go there.